Now it makes sense, since we understand that Yehovah is actually covering us the same way the master of this female servant covers her. He has to clothe her body while she serves him. This means also she was spiritually covered by him, and he had to take full responsibility for her even when she was not pleasing him. In order to understand what I'm saying here, we have to review the Abrahamic covenant. Remember that Yehovah made himself responsible for both sides of the covenant. He will carry out his side, and he will carry out or be responsible for our side too. So a human master, must also do what Yehovah did when it comes to female servants. This is because Israel is female. The nation of Israel is his bride. Yehovah, as Israel's master, makes himself responsible for her being displeasing to him. In a minute, you're going to see more of how this works. The English translation says she is betrothed to the master. But there is a word, Strong's 3808, that the English translator did not translate. This word is the Hebrew lo. It means no. And literally, that verse says, who has not betrothed. So verse 8 reads as if the female servant were betrothed to the master, and that this master has a son that he can pawn her to if he decides he doesn't like her. But the verse should read, who has not betrothed her, because of the untranslated word lo, which is Strong's 3808, which is right next to the word betrothed. You see, she is not married to the master. This is part of the reason why the rabbis say that, he dealt deceitfully with her, because she should have been married to him, but he didn't intend to marry her. So, let's do this again. Exodus 21:8. If she please not her master, who has not betrothed her to himself. See, she is not betrothed yet. And then in verse 9, and if he has betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. Now, you know that Mount Sinai was a betrothal ceremony. God brought Israel out of Egypt as a servant for whom he paid a dowry. And he brought her out by covering her at Pesach. And he continued to cover her with the pillars of cloud and fire. Now, did God really deal treacherously or deceitfully with Israel? No. Did he betray her? No. He covered her. He beged, Strong's 899. But remember that there were 3 tests that she did not pass. Remember that? We've read about that. Thus, she displeased him as a servant. So Yehovah the Father designated Yehovah the Son to betroth her. This is what happened at Mount Sinai. Now, who is our Redeemer in verse 8? It says, and then shall he let her be redeemed. Who is that? It's Yeshua, Yehovah the Son. He has been the designated Redeemer all along. So now we can see that Yehovah, in this second portion of the teachings on servitude in Mishpatim, we're seeing now that Yehovah is revealing himself to us in a completely new way for the very first time. You know, for the past 2,000 years prior to this Torah portion, God had been revealing himself in various ways, like as El Shaddai or Elohim or Adonai. Then, early in Shemot, he revealed himself as Yehovah. Now, he has just revealed himself in a new way. What would that be? That he has a son. The son that's mentioned in verse 9. Yehovah is both the Father and the Son, right there in Exodus 21. No, God has not changed, nor does he change. He is just continuing to reveal more of himself. So, the mistranslated word in verse 8 gives this section on servitude an entirely wrong connotation. As the Father, Yehovah is responsible for Israel regardless of her behavior because of the Abrahamic covenant. That cannot change, nor will it ever change. Thus, God expects his people to mimic his behavior. A human master would never be allowed to treat a female servant with such blatant disregard, because God doesn't treat his people with blatant disregard. But as their master that brought them out of Egypt as a servant, he has an option. That is, to betroth her to his son. Now, a betrothed woman can be divorced, and I'll go a little more into that in a minute. But it's important for us to see at this moment that this ordinance doesn't have to do with the servant as much as the master when we look at the deeper level. These are not about procedures for slavery. They are a living parable, our object lesson as we go through life, so that we'll understand our Master as Father and Son, and our role as Yehovah's bondservant. See, this shows us that God has no intention of letting us out of his grasp. And for us bondservants, this is welcome news. Now let's go to verse 10. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall not be diminished. What is duty of marriage? Well, it's the food and the clothing for her physical body, and her daily bread, her spiritual food, and her redemptive covering. Also, during the covenant with Abraham, God promised to defend and protect Israel, give them a land, make them a nation, and bring the Messiah to the world through them. See, these are the duties of his marriage to Israel. Has God taken another wife? Yes. His son died so he could take a wife after he divorced the house of Israel. The current betrothed is not the original wife. This is why he had to die. The only way to break a marriage covenant is for there to be a death, according to Torah. In Hosea, once God announced his divorce from the house of Israel, the only way to bring the descendants of the house of Israel, who are the descendants of Abraham, to him again, was to die. Again, another act of redemption. The Son redeemed the house of Israel, the house of Judah, and all the Gentiles who want to come along. He redeemed them by dying on that cross. So the betrothed bride that he has now is not, strictly speaking, the same wife that he had at Mount Sinai. But this new wife is an entirely new group that is expected to do better regarding the Torah than the original wife. But all through the house of Israel's travail for the last 2,700 years, YHWH the Father has not failed to keep track of his daughter, to keep track of the house of Israel, and to provide for them their spiritual food, their daily bread, and their redemptive covering, their clothing, have always been available to them, even when the consequences of their disobedience to Torah was being suffered by them. So let's tell this account in the light of the history of the nation of Israel. YHWH, that is, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, were at Mount Sinai. The Son, YHWH the Son, gave the Father's commandments to the nation of Israel at their betrothal. Those few weeks wandering in the desert was when she was a servant, but YHWH the Father designated her to his Son for betrothal. So she was betrothed at Mount Sinai, not put into servitude. She was taken from the status of servant to the status of betrothed at Mount Sinai. So the ordinance regarding servitude has to do with two perspectives on our relationship with YHWH. First, individuals can become bondservants by choice, and join the nation of Israel. This is called being grafted in. Second, she, the nation of Israel, was purchased. She became a servant. She was redeemed by the Son who betrothed her by giving her the rules of the house at Mount Sinai. Now we all know that when the Son marries the betrothed, and after the wedding supper that we're still expecting, after that happens, he takes her back to live in the Father's house. That is the format. Well, what we're doing with the Torah is learning how to live in his house, you see.